know as fight or flight. So the fight or flight reaction, neuroception of danger. We now feel a threat here. So the sympathetic nervous system is in charge and we want motion. This is an action response because we have to get ready to either flee or fight. That's the fight or flight response. The third one then is the red one, which is shut down. And that is the most primitive of our responses. And this is a neuroception of real extreme danger or a life-threatening situation. So this is our freeze response. So I'm just going to dig in a little bit deeper into each of these responses and show you exactly what is going on and why we move from response to response, or I suppose from state to state. So the first state is the rest and digest. When we're in a state of rest and digest, our neurochemistry is balanced. And this is where we want to be for the most of our time. We have a neuroception of safety. And as humans, our brain is a social organ. It needs to feel safe. And for introverts, this is really, really important. You need to feel even safe. We do have some extroverts who will come into any room and they will, take over and talk and whatever. But for introverts, you need a neuroception of safety. You need to feel like you belong and you feel safe in this environment before you're ready to participate or perform. So in this state of rest and digest, our story supports us. So what's going on in our mind is actually supporting us. We're feeling calm and grounded and centered. We're creative. And this is an important neuroscientific fact. Our eardrums are actually sensitive to human voices, because when we move into some of the other states, we're hearing at a higher frequency. So we actually can't take in the human voices around us. So this is where we want to be for the most of our time. But more than that, it's where we want, if we're managing, if we're in a position of leadership, we want our team to be in this state. So we'll be talking about triggering the green state as we go along. And this is exactly what we're talking about, because we want to trigger the green state. We're most productive in this state. So why do we need any other state then? Or why do we move out of this state? Well, quite frankly, around every corner is the tiger is lurching. So I'm going to invite you to imagine yourself back in the lovely green office with the lovely plant and the natural light and the sun is shining, unlike in Cork today. And think for a moment, what would knock you out of that state? Because we're looking at becoming more aware of our stress triggers. So if you could think of the top 3 things that are going to trigger you and just write them for yourself, for your own information on your page for a minute. They may be work related, family related, thoughts related, but just what is it for you? And now I'm actually going to go through with you what happens every time you trigger that response. So a message is going to be sent from the brain down to your adrenal glands. Adrenaline is released into the body. That's one of our stress neurochemicals, and that triggers a whole body reaction, which consists of, first of all, your heart rate goes up, your breathing becomes shallow, there's sugars and fats released into your bloodstream, and that sugar is addictive. And as we all know, when we're stressed, if you can think back to studying for your college exams, Leaving Cert, whatever, it wasn't the broccoli or the kale that you craved, it's the sugary foods. And of course, when you load in the sugar, that ups the stress reaction and prompts another stress cycle. So at that point, then the blood needs to go to your muscles because you need to get ready for fight or flight. It's no longer going to your digestive system, and you develop those symptoms like we all remember standing outside an interview room, in and out to the bathroom with diarrhea because your food isn't properly digested. Cortisol is released into the body, and we now have a neurochemical imbalance. So our system is now flooded with cortisol, and adrenaline. And our lovely neurochemicals, the dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin that keep us balanced and grounded and calm are now flooded with these. So this state is exhausting and it's addictive. So that's the second state, that's the fight or flight. Now I'm going to move on and talk about the third state, which is shutdown. So shutdown is our most primal response. It's our freeze state. And what happens when we spend too long in fight or flight, when we're being continually triggered, we're moving closer and closer to burnout or freeze state. And in this state, this is not about upping our getting that adrenaline rush to up our performance. We've gone way beyond that at this point. We are now in a state of freeze or disengagement, where breathing becomes shallow and we have that sense of overwhelm, dizziness. It's almost like an out of body experience. So those are the three states. And when we're triggered into the fight or flight state, not all stress is bad. We really need to get into that state to up our performance if we want to do an interview, or we have a meeting with our boss. In the Olympics, you might have noticed that many of the athletes have their their PBs at the Olympics because they have that adrenaline rush, competition day, up your performance. But what needs to happen is we need to finish out that cycle and get back into that calm and restful state. Because when we're in fight or flight, our eardrums are no longer attuned to human voices. We're now interested in hearing higher frequencies so we can detect danger. And the fight or flight state is addictive. And I'm sure many of you know people who almost wear it as a badge of honor. I'm really, really busy. But am I productive? I'm talking about how busy I am and I have all this stuff to do. But productivity, ability to focus and concentrate, that all goes once we move out of rest and digest. So as a result, our performance and our productivity are way down. And again, as a leader, it's really important to cultivate an environment where employees can thrive. So where they're not being triggered into fight or flight, where they feel safe, grounded, and can be more productive. So what we're trying to do as normal, healthy adults, we are trying to surf the stress waves. So in an ideal world, we want to move from the green to the orange and back into the green several times a day. And that's as a normal functioning, healthy adult. We want to be able to push outside our comfort zone to achieve our goals. But what happens is we forget to come back in, or the next stressor comes along, or our mind starts ruminating and worrying and all of that. So we want to get out onto that sea, surf those waves, and come back into that calm and grounded state. So I suppose the next question is, how do we know when enough stress becomes too much stress? So how would we notice if we're suffering from chronic stress? And I think this is a picture that has become quite familiar over the last 18 months. So I'm just going to briefly go through the signs and symptoms of chronic stress with you. So the first one there is the breathing becomes shallow. Now that's a really simple one to recognize, and I'm going to show you how to do it. So if you take the backs of your hands and put them behind your back, place them onto your ribs, down at the bottom of your ribs. Just continue to breathe normally. And if you notice your hands are moving, well, that means you are actually using the basis of your lungs. If your hands are not moving, you're probably shallow breathing. And just mindfully take a deeper breath in so that you are actually going down to the basis of the lungs. So that's the breathing. The next one is muscle tension and headaches. So the muscle tension is really persistent around the base of the skull. So if you take your fingertips again, go back to the base of your skull, push along the edge of the skull with your fingertips, come down to the bottom of your head and push along there. If that feels sore, as you touch it, well, then your muscles are tight in that area. And the predominant areas for muscle tension associated with stress are the base of the skull, down your neck, the shoulders. So ask yourself, where are my shoulders? Are they up at my ears, or are they actually resting down? And then down along the backs of the knees, sometimes we hold tension there. And one that I have actually started to recognize lately or talk about now that we're all in slippers or whatever, working from home, the curly toes, just to recognize that your toes aren't curled up under your desk. So the next one is tiredness and problems with sleep, because as we mentioned, we have a neurochemical imbalance. So our system has a lot of cortisol in it. So when we're going to bed at night with a whole load of cortisol, we may fall asleep, but as soon as we get into the light sleep, we'll wake up, the cortisol has us alert, and we have difficulty getting back to sleep. The tiredness is carried into the next day, and that just becomes another vicious cycle. We're struggling to focus and concentrate, as you see in the picture here. So we're spending hours doing stuff, but our concentration isn't where it's at. So if you find that you're very unproductive and you have the other symptoms as well, it may be time to start looking at your stress levels. And we mentioned then that the blood flow is now going to your muscles. It's not going to your digestive system. So that's when we start to get the nausea and the diarrhea. So that's another symptom. The other one, and I'm actually quite passionate about this, is teeth grinding, because at the moment I'm going through a whole lot of dental work. And as my oral surgeon said to me very nicely, did anybody ever tell you that you've been grinding your teeth for years? So if you think you suffer from stress, very simple question at the next visit to the dentist: is there any evidence of teeth grinding? If there is, you can get a simple plastic mouth guard now, which will protect your teeth. The next one there is reduced immunity. And in a current global pandemic, the last thing we want is low immunity, because that's when we start to pick up all those bugs and viruses, and we're more susceptible to picking up things. So if you find that you're moving from a cough to a cold to the next thing and the next thing, that is another sign. And then the last one, and if you're here, this is an urgent visit to the GP. High blood pressure and chest pain. And this was one I became very aware of when I worked in the hospital. Young, healthy people coming into the cardiology department with high blood pressure, chest pain, clinical indications, stressful job, stress. So if you're at this point, it is definitely time for action. So with all that in mind, and I hope I'm not, it's not information overload, I'm going to look at now, what can you do immediately to help yourself to stay calm in stressful times. So we're going to look at two things. That's raising your own level of self-awareness, and I'm going to give you a breathing exercise. So we talked about stress, we talked about the state and the story. So self-awareness around your state. I invite clients very early in my sessions to practice this checking in 3 or 4 times a day. And you may even need to set a reminder on your phone. Check in. How am I feeling? Is there tightness in the base of my skull? Are my shoulders up around my ears? Where is my breathing? And move down along the body. And then check in with your story. Where are my thoughts now? What's preoccupying my mind? Is that serving me? So you're raising your own self-awareness around what's going on with your state and your story. And the second one then is breathing. So I talked about that ventral branch of the vagus nerve being in charge of keeping you in that rest and digest. So thankfully, we can actually trigger that and hack it, because the signals go bi-directional. The signal goes from the brain to the body, but it also goes the other way around, from the body back to the brain. And we can't control our circulatory system nor our digestive system, but we can actually slow down our breathing. So there's many breathing exercises. I'm just going to go through a simple one with you now, and a minimum of 2 minutes. So if you find there's a stressful situation coming on, or you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, stop. This takes 2 minutes. The one I'm going to talk you through is the 4-7-8. This is one Jerry Hussey uses, actually. So you're taking a deep breath in for the count of 4, blowing up your abdomen as the breath goes in. You're holding for the count of 7, and you're exhaling through your mouth for the count of 8. So it's inhaling through the nose, holding, and out for 8. So I'm just going to do 2 rounds of it with you here now. So if you sit comfortably on the chair and relax, and he suggests putting your tongue to the top of your mouth behind your teeth. It will work either way. So we're going to inhale through the nose for the count of 4, hold for the count of 7, and exhale through the mouth for the count of 8. So are we ready? Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And relax. So ideally, we should be doing about 5 rounds of that to get it up to kind of the 2 minutes. So they're the 2 tips. So due to time now, that's